Hey there, it's Nick from Ruly. Last week we covered creating polling rules on tables, but an even more common use case is polling for updates from an API. In this video, I'll walk you through how to set that up. To poll from an API, we first need to configure the API call that will provide the new polled records. For that, an external connection is created that has polling as the type. In this example, I am polling expenses from another Ruly environment. The authentication field requires HTTP headers for your API call. You have the choice to use an OAuth provider that dynamically generates tokens for one or multiple sets of credentials, or something simpler like a static API key. In this case, I'm using a static API key. The base URL field must be the endpoint that returns a list of records. In this case, expenses. For polling to work, your API needs to return a list that we can iterate over, as well as support filtering of that list, so we can get only the new or updated records instead of reprocessing everything. By default, this is a GET request, but you can also configure it as a POST if your API requires it, and even pass filtering parameters in the request body instead of the URL. The polling start is a merge field that keeps track of the last successful run, so each time the poll runs, it only looks for records created after that point. Let's try clicking on the test button. Here we see the success message is displayed, which means the connection is working. We can click on the Test API Logs tab to see a list of API calls from this external connection. I can open a record to see the full request and response. This is helpful for debugging and confirming that the API is returning the data that you expect. Now let's look at a polling rule that's connected to the external connection that we just showed. As you can see, this rule is configured to run every half hour. The records that are polled are processed via a create operation linked to this rule. This operation creates a new expense record for each item returned by the API. Using the target field values, this create operation is mapping values from the JSON response. Clicking on the magnifying glass icon, we can choose a value from the polled JSON. We can also assign hard-coded mappings such as this external toggle. Here we see on the expense claims list there is a column for an external toggle field. This toggle labels the records that were pulled from the external connection. I can filter this column to only show external records. Here we see a list of external records that were pulled from my other Ruly environment. Using polling rules, you can configure fetching updates for each of your users and syncing them in your Ruly app. You can configure events based on those external events. For example, fetch any new Google contacts and create a profile in Ruly and send them an automatic welcome email. Thanks for watching.